Let's begin with China. When last we checked in, China was a thriving manufacturing power about to be overtaken by Europe, but still heavily involved in world trade, especially as an importer of silver from the Spanish Empire. Europeans had to use silver because they didn't really produce anything else the Chinese wanted, and that state of affairs continued through the 18th century. For example, in 1793, the McCartney mission tried to get better trade conditions with China and was a total failure. But then Europeans, especially the British, found something that the Chinese would buy: opium. By the 1830s, British free trade policy unleashed a flood of opium in China, which threatened China's favorable balance of trade. It also created a lot of drug addicts. And then in 1839, the Chinese responded to what they saw as these unfair trade practices with a stern letter that they never actually sent. But even if the British had received this terrifying threat to their precious rhubarb supply, they probably wouldn't have responded, because selling drugs is super lucrative. So the Chinese made like tea partiers, confiscating a bunch of British opium and chucking it into the sea. And then the British responded to this by demanding compensation and access to Chinese territory where they could carry out their trade. And then the Chinese were like, man, that seems a little bit harsh, whereupon the British sent in gunships, opening trade with Canton by force. Chinese General Yi Qing made a counterattack in 1842 that included a detailed plan to catapult flaming monkeys onto British ships. Stan, is that true? Alright, apparently the plans actually involved strapping fireworks to monkeys' backs and were never carried out, but still. Anyway, due to lack of monkey fireworks, the Chinese counterattacks were unsuccessful, and they eventually signed the Treaty of Nanjing, which stated that Britain got Hong Kong and 5 other treaty ports, as well as the equivalent of $2 billion in cash. Also, the Chinese basically gave up all sovereignty to European spheres of influence, wherein Europeans were subject to their laws, not Chinese laws. In exchange for all of this, China got a hot slice of nothing. You might think the result of this war would be a shift in the balance of trade in Britain's favor, but that wasn't immediately the case. In fact, the British were importing so much tea from China that the trade deficit actually rose more than $30 billion. But eventually, after another war and one of the most destructive civil rebellions in Chinese and possibly world history, the Taiping Rebellion, the situation was reversed, and Europeans, especially the British, became the dominant economic power in China.